Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Elara had always believed that fate could be changed. 5 years ago, she had felt her entire world collapse when the man she trusted above all others walked away. At first, she clung to the naive hope that he would realize his error, turn around, and take her hand again, ready to honor the bond they once shared. That hope dwindled day by day until it vanished completely. Standing in front of her modest home's window, she recalled the morning light of those days past, how it used to fill her heart with quiet expectation. Now, 5 years later, the sunshine glinted off her engagement ring, a vivid reminder of how far she had come. She was no longer the shattered young woman who would stare at the dawn, desperate for a shadow on the horizon that meant he had returned. Instead, she was committed to building a new life. Yet, in the depth of her being, she remembered what it felt like to be rejected by her fated mate. She fingered the delicate gold band on her left hand, an early promise from Everett, the man she planned to marry. Although Everett was not her mate in the supernatural sense, he had proven to be patient and caring in ways that had slowly pieced her broken heart back together. They were set to wed by the end of the year, just as soon as the final preparations were in place. Some days, she felt a pang of guilt for not loving him with the same wild abandon she had once offered another. Still, she respected her fiancé deeply, and in his stable presence she had found a new sense of contentment. He was part of a smaller werewolf pack located in a nearby territory, a cluster of honest, hard-working individuals who had welcomed her kindly. In a way, they had given her a fresh beginning. Yet, no matter how much time passed, she would never completely erase the boy she had known, the boy who had now become the alpha of the strongest pack in the region. Word had traveled faster than wildfire. Rowan was back in the territory. That piece of news had drifted in on hushed whispers, and Elara had stood as still as a statue when she first heard it. The name alone brought too many memories, some sweet and many bitter. It was not that she had forgotten him. Such a thing was impossible. She had simply learned how to live around the persistent ache that resided in her chest every time she recalled their last conversation. He had left her when she was convinced they were destined. Now, he was returning at the peak of his power, crowned as the alpha of a pack that dwarfed the might of any nearby clans. Yet all that status did not concern her so much as the old question burning in her thoughts. Why had he left at all? She had never been given a real explanation. He had walked out of her life, ignoring the mate bond, something so sacred among werewolves, but only the truly desperate or utterly cold-hearted could sever it without a care. To this day, she did not know which category described him. That morning, as she stood in her kitchen brewing a cup of tea, Elara mulled over what Rowan's return could mean. Perhaps it was just official pack business. Perhaps he would not even remember her, though that was an absurd notion. Wolves never forgot their mates, even if they rejected them. Their primal instincts recognized the essence of that soul, tethered by an invisible strand that could stretch across any distance. She took a measured sip, exhaling slowly as the fragrant steam drifted across her face. 5 years was a long time, more than enough for a person to transform entirely. She certainly felt changed. Her hair was longer now, almost reaching her waist, and she had discovered a sharper backbone that kept her from giving in to despair. Though she was not the unstoppable force she wanted to be, she was resilient enough to hold her ground. She had no doubt Rowan had also changed, Rumors hinted that he was even more formidable than his predecessors, a leader who commanded loyalty and admiration. Old packmates whispered that his temper had intensified, his instincts honed by life-or-death struggles. Some even said his wolf was restless, quick to challenge any perceived threat. By the time Everett joined her in the kitchen, his hair still damp from the shower, her mind was swirling with too many questions. But she saw no need to concern her fiancé with them, so she slid him a warm smile and handed him a plate of scrambled eggs. He leaned forward to plant a thankful kiss on her cheek. She lifted her gaze to his calm, gray eyes and felt her nerves settle slightly. Everett was not the sort to be easily provoked or to demand too much from her. He had given her a gentle steadiness at a time when she had none. If she occasionally seemed lost in her thoughts, he never pried. Despite the difference between them, he was the one who saw value in her. She was grateful for that, even if there was a guarded part of her heart that refused to be fully open. While they ate, Everett mentioned that rumors of Rowan's pack's expansion were causing ripples. The largest pack in the region had apparently secured major trade routes and was forging alliances with smaller packs, possibly including Everett's. A treaty was in the works, which might explain Rowan's presence. "I heard he's heading a conference of sorts," Everett said, curiosity flickering in his voice. "My father might attend, and if so, I'll be part of the entourage to represent the more moderate factions. We want to see if these expansions offer us any real benefit." Elara nodded silently, staring at the grain of the wooden table. The idea of crossing paths with Rowan threatened to unnerve her, but she forced her composure. She had made her choice 5 years ago, or perhaps that choice had been forced upon her. There was no room to waver now. If fate had a twisted sense of humor, perhaps it would amuse itself by making them meet face to face again. But she was prepared, or so she told herself. She had worn heartbreak on her sleeve for far too long to buckle under the first sign of renewed tension. She spent the rest of the morning tucked away in her workshop, a small studio behind the house where she designed and crafted intricate jewelry. It was a hobby that had grown into a modest business. Among her tools and beads, she could lose herself, focusing on patterns and gleams of metal rather than old scars. Occasionally, she paused to glance at the ring she wore, not just as a symbol of her engagement, but also as a reminder that she had moved on. She was forging a new path with someone who cared for her. She no longer waited around for Rowan's footsteps on her porch or a note under her door. Her heart still throbbed with distant echoes, but she refused to be enslaved by the past. Early in the afternoon, she received a visit from Camilla, one of her friends from the neighboring pack. After exchanging pleasantries, Camilla set down a small crate of materials that Elara had requested for her jewelry making. "You look stressed," Camilla remarked softly. She fiddled with a silver chain that Elara had been working on. "Is it the news about Rowan?" Though Elara had not shared the full depth of her past with Camilla, the basics were well known among the local werewolves. Rowan had been Elara's destined mate, but he had departed without fulfilling the bond. In werewolf circles, the bond was revered, and having it rejected carried a certain stigma. It was natural for rumors to spread. Still, Camilla had always tried to tread gently around the subject. "Elara, I know it isn't easy," she continued, "but you've built a good life. If he's here for treaties, it might not affect you at all. If you have to see him, just remember everything you've already survived." Elara placed a hand over Camilla's. "Thank you," she replied, voice subdued. "I'm ready. At least I think I am. I can't deny some of the old pain is resurfacing, but I'm not the same person he left behind. I won't let him unravel me again." Camilla gave a warm nod, and offered to help sort through the materials. For an hour, they organized beads and tools, occasionally chatting about the upcoming ceremony that was being planned between the local packs. The possibility of unifying under Rowan's leadership was a significant development for the region. While it seemed advantageous from a broader perspective, fewer disputes over territory, stronger defense lines, Elara's gut churned at the thought of witnessing him in a position of authority. In her memories, he had once been tender, his protective instincts fierce yet comforting. She wondered how that side of him had evolved after so many years. Once the work was done, Camilla offered to drop by again, and left. Elara lingered in the workshop, staring at a half-finished pendant with a wolf motif. She had sketched the design while reminiscing about the bond she once thought was unbreakable. Tiny chips of turquoise were meant to form the wolf's eyes, signifying loyalty and intensity. She had never finished it, uncertain of whether she wanted to hold on to that memory or let it go. Perhaps, ironically, completing the piece would be her final act of closure. By late afternoon, she stepped out to gather some fresh air. The small garden behind her studio had rows of potted herbs and flowers that she tended each day. Its quiet serenity was a haven from her swirling thoughts. She carefully watered the plants, mindful of each leaf and bud, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing something that expected nothing from her. The gentle breeze stirred the leaves, sending a few petals drifting. She sensed her wolf quietly stirring within, unsettled by the tension that came from Rowan's reemergence. It reminded her that, beneath her calm exterior, she remained a creature guided by instinct, tied to the heartbeat of the pack. Her wolf had once yearned for Rowan, and the primal connection was not something the logical mind could easily override. When evening rolled around, Everett returned from a short trip to a nearby settlement. He looked energized, but his expression shifted to concern as soon as he spotted Elara's demeanor. "I heard more details from the council," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Rowan's delegates are holding a formal event. It's tomorrow night, and all local packs are invited." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You and I should go, Elara. You know your insight might be valuable. My father holds you in high esteem, and I do too. But if it's too painful, I can go alone. It's your decision." Elara felt her heart leap into her throat. A public gathering meant an almost certain encounter with Rowan. If they were in the same room, she doubted she could hide. 5 years ago, he had left an imprint on her soul. Her wolf would sense him the moment he arrived. Yet a part of her resolved not to cower. She had spent years healing and forging a new path. She had faced heartbreak and loneliness. She was not about to let an unexpected reunion undo her. "I'll go," she said quietly, eyes firm with determination. "I appreciate your concern, but I need to show everyone, including myself, that I've truly moved forward, and maybe this is what I need to put an end to that chapter, by facing it head-on." Everett squeezed her hand gently. "I'll be by your side. No matter what happens, I want you to know I'm here for you." Despite the anxiety knotting her stomach, Elara managed a grateful smile. She respected his unwavering support. He did not have the primal claim on her that Rowan once did, but he chose to stand with her, through her moods and her demons. For that, she was thankful. In his steadfastness, she found a soothing balm against her old wounds. She hoped that, in time, that comfort could blossom into a deeper love. That night, she slept restlessly, her dreams scattering visions of forest trails, howling nights, and a pair of penetrating eyes that had once been her safe haven. When she woke, her heart pounded with residual emotion from the dream. She banished the images, focusing instead on the morning routine, preparing breakfast, double-checking the event details, trying on a flowing burgundy dress that would fit the somewhat formal atmosphere. As she admired her reflection, she noted the determination in her own gaze. Her long hair was styled to frame her face, and the ring on her finger glimmered under the glow of the overhead light. Tonight, she would stand proudly at Everett's side, no longer the lost girl of 5 years ago. They set out for the Grand Hall at sunset, traveling with a small group from Everett's family. The building was a wide stone structure, ordinarily used for official gatherings. Tonight, the perimeter was adorned with lanterns and embroidered banners showcasing various pack symbols. Guards in black uniforms stood at the doors, quietly guiding visitors inside. Elara's pulse quickened at the sight of so many werewolves converging for one purpose, especially under Rowan's name. His ascendancy had truly shaken the region, and everyone was eager to see how he would wield this newfound power. Inside, the hall was buzzing with conversation. Tables draped in crisp linen lined one side, holding drinks and light refreshments. The entire room glowed from hanging chandeliers, their crystals scattering light in soft angles. Elara felt an immediate tension in the atmosphere, as if everyone was waiting for the arrival of the one who had orchestrated the event. She made small talk with Everett's father and some acquaintances from his pack, quietly grateful for the distraction. Every few seconds her eyes flicked to the main entrance, drawn by an invisible magnet she wished she could resist. At exactly 8 in the evening, the background chatter hushed. Elara's ears pricked at the shift, her wolf alert. Movement by the large double doors signaled the arrival of Rowan and his highest-ranking packmates. He stepped in with an authoritative stride, wearing a tailored suit that fit him in a way that highlighted the powerful build beneath. Gone was the carefree youth she remembered. His jawline was sharper, and a controlled energy emanated from him. His dark hair, once carelessly messy, was now trimmed neatly. There was a distinct aura that seemed to radiate from him, part confidence, part primal force, and everyone in the room reacted on instinct, either bowing or standing straighter. He was the alpha, and no one could deny it. Elara could sense his presence like a jolt of electricity across her skin. She resisted the urge to shrink back, reminding herself to hold her chin up. Beside Rowan was a small group of advisors, wolves with keen eyes and poised stances. From the corner of the room, she watched him scan the crowd, greeting various elders, exchanging cordial nods with acquaintances. With every passing moment he was drawing closer to her position. Her wolf stirred, recalling the imprint of his scent, the memory of his embrace. She clenched her hand in Everett's, seeking a grounding point in this swirl of tense emotions. Finally, Rowan approached Everett's father. The conversation was polite and direct, each man offering a firm handshake. There was a straightforwardness in Rowan's gaze as he outlined the intentions for the pact, a mutual agreement designed to facilitate trade and security. He spoke with a polished confidence, every word methodical. Though Elara tried to blend into the background, she felt the intensity of Rowan's awareness. He had not yet looked directly at her, but his posture changed slightly, as if he recognized her presence and was deciding how to handle it. Her heart pounded like a war drum in her chest. She braced herself when Everett introduced her, his voice carrying a note of pride. "Rowan, this is Elara, my fiancée. She is a talented designer, and my family holds her in high regard." He said it all in good faith, unaware of the volcanic tensions simmering just beneath the surface. The moment Rowan's eyes locked on Elara, a powerful jolt surged through both of them. She felt it in her chest, a throb of the old connection that had never fully died. His gaze held a storm of emotions, carefully concealed by his imposing composure. Here, face to face, she did not see a cold, indifferent alpha. She saw the flicker of recognition in his dark irises, the faint betrayal of regret. A subtle muscle twitched in his jaw, as if he was fighting the impulse to say more than was appropriate. "It is good to meet you," Rowan said in a low voice, nodding stiffly. His words were formal, devoid of personal warmth, but his gaze spoke volumes. It drilled into her, as if searching for any sign that might indicate how she felt after all this time. Her own expression remained neutral, carefully schooled to reveal nothing of the tumult raging inside her. Her wolf yearned to move closer, to reacquaint itself with a presence that had once been everything. She refused to let it show. She gave a polite dip of her head, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Likewise. I appreciate your leadership in orchestrating this event. It will be beneficial for many packs." The formality of her tone made it sound almost like she was speaking to a stranger, which was, in many ways, exactly what he was to her now. For a brief second, silence enveloped them. The swirl of voices around them seemed to fade. Rowan's advisors hovered at a respectful distance, and Everett stood calmly at Elara's side, unaware of the invisible threads that bound the two people before him. Then Rowan blinked, as though breaking a spell, and turned away, calmly addressing the matter of territory lines with Everett's father once more. The moment had passed, but the residue of the encounter left Elara feeling as though she had just escaped the edge of a blade. The next few hours became an exercise in controlled composure. Elara found herself in multiple small discussions about trade agreements and ways to enhance collaboration among various packs. She managed to be cordial, even while her mind raced with half-formed thoughts. One question beat like a drum inside her head. Why? Why did he reject her 5 years ago? And why had he come back now in a blaze of authority? She did not expect an answer. Any explanation would be too little, too late. But a part of her, the part still nursing the remnants of heartbreak, craved to understand. At the evening's conclusion, the crowd began to trickle out. Rowan and his advisors remained behind, gathering at the head table to finalize some documents. Elara, seeing that Everett was engaged in conversation with an elder, decided to slip outside for a moment of fresh air. The cool night breeze brushed her skin, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She inhaled deeply, feeling her heartbeat gradually settle. The stars above were bright, dotting the sky in scattered silver lights. She used to gaze at them in her youth, convinced they held omens for the future. Tonight, they only reminded her that the universe was vast, and her troubles were just one story among countless. When she heard footsteps on the gravel, she turned to find Rowan standing a short distance away. His posture was guarded, hands at his sides, but his eyes were no less intense. "I needed some air, too," he commented, his tone subdued. The lines around his mouth suggested an inner turmoil. Elara felt her wolf stir, drawn instinctively to its rightful mate. She clenched her fists, refusing to let old instincts override her sense of self. "It is a pleasant night," she said, forcing calm. "The sky is clearer than it has been in a while." She refused to break eye contact, even as her heart thundered. He nodded, gaze drifting upwards to the heavens. "So it is." Silence followed for a beat. Then he exhaled, his breath releasing pent-up tension. "You seem well, Elara. I was not sure how life would treat you after I left." Her throat tightened at the barely veiled reference to his rejection. "I have found my way, Rowan. That is all that matters." She paused, searching for the right words, even though part of her screamed to say nothing at all. "You are the alpha now. Congratulations on your leadership." Her voice sounded distant, as though it belonged to someone else. He tensed for an instant, as if he wanted to speak, but the weight of 5 years of silence loomed between them. At length he managed a subdued, "Thank you." Elara glanced toward the door, feeling the conversation inching toward dangerous ground. The pain was palpable, even though they were both being excruciatingly polite. "I should go back inside. My fiancé will be looking for me." She emphasized the word fiancé in the hope of reminding herself and him that her life was no longer bound by his choices. Rowan's expression darkened for the briefest moment. She thought she detected regret etched in his features, but he hid it behind a measured nod. "Of course. Good night, Elara." She offered a curt nod in return, stepping past him toward the entrance. A swirl of emotions followed her, swirling in her stomach. Heartbreak, anger, and an odd sense of longing she wished would vanish. As she walked away, her ears picked up the faintest hiss of breath as Rowan exhaled behind her, as if the effort of speaking to her had come at a steep cost. She did not allow herself to turn around. When she re-entered the grand hall, Everett spotted her and gave a questioning tilt of his head. She smiled to reassure him, weaving her way through the thinning crowd. Together, they said their farewells and left for home, riding in silence for much of the journey. Though Everett spoke a bit about the success of the negotiations, she offered only the minimal responses. He did not push her, sensing she was weary, and perhaps believing that the evening's tension had been overwhelming for everyone. Once they were back at the house, Elara headed to the bedroom and carefully removed the burgundy dress, her mind alight with thoughts she wished she could still. Memories flooded in. Rowan's warmth the first time they had kissed under the moonlight, the stroke of his fingers on her cheek when he vowed he would always protect her. The sense of betrayal that had followed still felt fresh. She chastised herself for letting old feelings stir, but her wolf remained restless, uneasy with the stifling of the bond. She crawled into bed, hoping for a dreamless sleep, and Everett joined her moments later. As she drifted off to the sound of his quiet breathing, she wondered if, somewhere across the territory, Rowan also lay awake, haunted by all that had gone wrong. The next morning found Elara restless and distracted, with faint circles under her eyes from a night devoid of restful sleep. She did not share the details of her late conversation with Rowan, but Everett must have sensed her inner turmoil. He offered her a comforting embrace and suggested a walk through the fields near their home. It was a simple gesture, one that she appreciated more than she could put into words. While strolling over the gentle slopes, they spoke of the wedding plans, the color of flowers to decorate the ceremony, the design of the invitations. Each word felt like a step away from her confusion, a commitment to the life she wanted to build. By the time they returned to the house, Elara felt fractionally lighter, determined not to let Rowan's reappearance derail the path she had chosen. Yet fate had other plans. It came in the form of a messenger that afternoon, an official courier from Rowan's pack with an invitation in hand. The parchment bore a formal seal, requesting her presence at a second gathering, this time a smaller meeting meant for key individuals who might advise or influence the final shape of the newly proposed alliance. Her name was specifically listed, along with Everett, his father, and a few others. The language was polite but clear. Rowan wanted her there. Her heart tightened as she read it, suspecting that he had orchestrated her inclusion. The political reasons were plausible. After all, she was an artisan known among the neighboring packs, and her insights on trade were indeed valuable. But her instincts whispered that there was another motive lurking behind his calculated formality. "It seems we have no choice," Everett observed gently. "My father insists we attend. This alliance is crucial for the pack's future, and your expertise is recognized. If you do not want to go, though, I can make excuses." Elara pressed her lips together. She could almost hear Rowan's voice in her head, taste the tension of that brief encounter. Was he trying to corner her into a forced conversation, or was she just paranoid? Regardless, refusing to attend could jeopardize Everett's pack, as well as her own standing in the region. She squared her shoulders. "I will go," she replied quietly, setting the invitation aside. "I will help ensure this treaty benefits us all." Somewhere inside, she also wanted clarity. Perhaps this meeting would finally force Rowan to address the gap he had left in her life. That evening, she prepared carefully. She donned a simple forest green dress, nothing too ostentatious, and braided her hair, leaving a few tendrils loose around her face. Before stepping out, she caught sight of her reflection again, noting the tension in her eyes. She inhaled deeply, silently commanding herself to hold firm. Despite the tumult in her soul, she would not let her composure shatter. And so, with Everett by her side, she left for the second meeting, uncertain of how the night would end or what new emotions would be stirred. All she knew was that the stage was set for something more personal than mere pack politics. Her past and present were about to collide, and it remained to be seen whether her future would be caught in the crossfire. From the moment Elara stepped into the smaller council chamber, she sensed the taut atmosphere. This gathering was less crowded than the formal event held in the main hall the previous night. The participants were seated around a broad, oval table made of polished oak. High-backed chairs ringed the table, and at the far end, Rowan presided with the quiet authority that came naturally to him. Advisors from different packs occupied the seats, and a hush fell over the room when Elara, Everett, and his father arrived. They took their places near one side, and she avoided eye contact with Rowan, focusing instead on the neat parchment documents in front of each seat. A pack elder opened the discussion by summarizing the proposed trade routes, security measures, and territorial boundaries. The conversation quickly grew intricate, encompassing the delicate balancing act between each pack's autonomy and the potential benefits of a unified approach. Elara, in her capacity as a designer who often negotiated the sale of her craftsmanship across different territories, found her voice valued. She detailed how smoother travel regulations could boost commerce, benefiting artisans and local businesses, thus pouring additional funds into the pack's defense funds. As she spoke, she was aware of Rowan's unwavering attention on her, but she kept her tone steady, determined not to falter. Occasionally, glances passed between the other delegates, curious about why Rowan was so keen for Elara to have a seat at this table. They might have guessed the truth, or heard whispers of it, yet no one dared to broach the subject. The tension was palpable, though, like a wire stretched tight, ready to snap if mishandled. Rowan contributed calmly to the conversation, showing a surprising willingness to cooperate. The commanding edge in his voice was tinged with rationality and a seeming desire to ensure that smaller packs did not feel bullied. It almost impressed her to see how seamlessly he navigated the complexities of leadership. But each time their eyes met, a charge of unspoken emotion surged through the air. She could not help but feel that beneath his composed exterior, he was wrestling with a storm. And so the meeting went on for hours, with proposals and amendments exchanged, until it was agreed that a trial period of mutual cooperation would be established before a permanent alliance was finalized. Representatives would be sent to Rowan's pack to learn how to manage the new trade routes, and in return, Rowan's pack would provide training sessions on security measures. It was, by all accounts, a reasonable compromise. When the proceedings finally ended, most attendees rose from their chairs, stretching stiff limbs and gathering their notes. The mood was cautiously optimistic, the foundation of a significant alliance laid before them. Elara gathered her own papers, relieved that the discussions were over. Now she could return to her workshop, dive back into her craft, and bury her uncertainties under the comfort of routine. But as the group dispersed, Rowan approached Everett and his father, requesting a private conversation about some finer points. Everett's father readily agreed, though he was eager to move on, offering the suggestion that they continue the talk in a side chamber. Rowan nodded, then his eyes slid toward Elara. "I would like for you to join us, if you are able. Your expertise on trade logistics is valuable." She hesitated, but Everett glanced at her encouragingly. With a small sigh, she nodded, not wanting to appear uncooperative. They moved into an adjoining room, smaller, with a single table and a window overlooking a courtyard. Once inside, Rowan closed the door, leaving them in a tight space with only a couple of chairs. He began with practical matters, clarifying how her distribution network could integrate with the newly proposed routes. Elara answered his questions with calm professionalism. Everett and his father chimed in occasionally, but soon it felt as though Rowan was directing the majority of his inquiries at Elara. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her each time she spoke. A subtle tension took root in the pit of her stomach. After several minutes, Everett's father looked at his watch. "I hate to be rude, but I have pressing business at home that demands my attention. If it is acceptable, Everett and Elara can continue. Our family's stance is aligned with any logistic strategy they agree to." He offered Rowan a polite nod, ignoring the undercurrent in the room, then excused himself swiftly. Elara felt her stomach twist at the realization that he had effectively left her alone with Rowan and Everett. Rowan turned back to her, clearing his throat softly. "In that case, perhaps we can delve a bit deeper into the shipping schedules." Everett shifted his weight, an uncertain look passing across his face. "Actually, Elara, I recall we had an engagement this afternoon." She shook her head faintly, understanding that if they left now, it might be taken as an insult. "We can spare a few minutes," she murmured, trying to keep her voice neutral. Her fiancé nodded, though concern lingered in his eyes. He positioned himself closer to her, his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. They talked about delivery times and storage facilities. Rowan proposed efficient ways to consolidate shipments for maximum profit. Elara found his suggestions surprisingly beneficial, if a bit thorough. He had always been intelligent, but she did not recall him having such a knack for logistics. Perhaps his time away had sharpened his leadership abilities. Despite the swirl of conflicting emotions within her, she had to acknowledge that he was prepared, that his new role had demanded competence, and that he had risen to meet that challenge. But then, abruptly, Rowan changed the topic, his voice gentler. "Elara, how have you been faring these past years?" Everett tensed at the shift. The question was too personal, too direct. Elara could hear the subtext in Rowan's voice. He was testing the boundaries, trying to gauge her reaction. She forced her gaze to remain steady. "I have been well," she replied, brushing off the question with short politeness. "I have found work that fulfills me, and I have the support of a good man. There is not much more one can ask for in this life." Everett cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Precisely. We are happy, Rowan, and we appreciate your concern, but you can rest assured that Elara has everything she needs." The atmosphere became charged, crackling with tension. Rowan's wolfish energy flared for a heartbeat. Though he did not outwardly challenge Everett, his posture signaled a silent, deeper claim. Elara felt the hair on her arms rise, her own wolf responding to the unseen currents of dominance. She refused to let the primal tension frighten her, so she lifted her chin. "I believe we have covered everything. We should be on our way." Rowan's eyes flicked between them, the corner of his mouth tight. After a beat, he nodded. Of course. Thank you for your time. I value your input. The polite words clashed with the undercurrent of unresolved emotion. Everett ushered her toward the door. Before they stepped out, Rowan spoke again, voice barely above a whisper, yet clearly audible to Elara's keen hearing. If you have any further thoughts, do not hesitate to reach out. I believe your insights might influence a smoother transition to this new arrangement. She paused, meeting his gaze for a final second. I appreciate the invitation, but I am certain you have plenty of advisors at your disposal, Alpha. She used his title pointedly, acknowledging who he was now, and reminding herself who she was not. With that, she and Everett left, walking side by side down the corridor, the echo of their footsteps a faint drumbeat in the halls. Once they reached the outside, Everett let out a shaky breath and tugged Elara into a secluded corner of the courtyard. Ivy climbed the stone walls, and the scent of blooming flowers sweetened the air. He searched her face. I can sense how tense you are, he said quietly. I know you have a history with Rowan, but I do not think I realized just how intense it was. Elara tried to muster a reassuring smile, though it felt hollow. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steadiness of his heartbeat. We have not talked much about my past, she admitted. It is complicated. Our wolves recognized each other, but it did not work out. He chose a different path and left. That is all there is to it. Everett pressed his forehead gently against hers, voice tinged with sympathy. And now he is back, more powerful than ever. And he obviously wants something from you that goes beyond trade routes. I do not know if it is closure or an attempt to rekindle what he abandoned, but I want you to know that I stand by you. If you need space to handle this, say the word. I do not want to see you in pain. Emotion constricted Elara's throat. She appreciated Everett's empathy more than he could possibly know. I promise you, she said softly, I have no intention of returning to that heartbreak. You have been my anchor, my choice. Nothing Rowan does will change that. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close in an embrace that radiated warmth and acceptance. She closed her eyes, letting the simple comfort of his presence stave off the trembling fear in her stomach. In all her years, she had not expected to find someone so patient and supportive in the aftermath of a shattered mate bond. Yet here he was, offering an unwavering devotion she was determined to cherish. They left the council building soon after. On the ride back home, Elara was quiet, staring out the window at the rolling landscapes. Pack territories spanned vast tracts of forests and valleys, each parcel marked by its own history. As the vehicle rolled past familiar landmarks, she contemplated how her own story had changed. She had always pictured her future as Rowan's mate, destined to stand at his side as they led their pack together. Then came the shock of his departure, and she had been forced to piece together a new future. Now, with her engagement to Everett, she felt at least some measure of stability. Nevertheless, an unresolved ache lingered, one she kept locked away in a private vault within her heart. That evening, she tried to immerse herself in her craft, forging 2 custom bracelets for a client from another town. She meticulously inlaid tiny stones, each chosen for color and cut, hoping the concentrated work would keep her mind occupied. But images of Rowan's dark gaze kept slipping past her defenses, reminding her of feelings she had long believed buried. She pushed them away with a stubborn will, refusing to be weakened by ghosts of a life she no longer lived. She had given him a chance. Once. This time, she would not cave to unspoken longing. Days passed in relative calm. Elara returned to her usual routine of designing jewelry, tending her garden, and discussing wedding arrangements with Everett. But Rowan was never far from her thoughts, especially as new reports circulated about the trial period of the alliance. Trade caravans began moving more smoothly through known routes, conflicts over minor border disputes started to subside, and local merchants praised the beneficial impact on their businesses. All of this underscored Rowan's competence as a leader, fueling curiosity among the smaller packs. Elara's own fiancé fielded multiple inquiries about how the new arrangement was affecting them, and each time she overheard Rowan's name, followed by remarks of approval. One afternoon, Everett headed off to attend a follow-up gathering at Rowan's main territory. Elara had declined to go, needing a respite from the fraught atmosphere. Instead, she planned a relaxing day with a few acquaintances, strolling through the local marketplace. She savored the sweet pastries, admired the stalls selling everything from fresh produce to hand-woven fabrics, and chatted with vendors who recognized her from her jewelry business. The day was pleasant and free of complications, until she sensed a shift in the crowd. Heads turned, voices hushed, and she spotted a group of Rowan's enforcers wading through the throngs. Her pulse spiked. Why would they be here? Before she could slip away, the enforcers approached her. Their leader stepped forward, face solemn, and stated that Rowan had requested her presence at his territory. Confusion battered her thoughts. Why? She asked. Is something wrong with Everett? Was there trouble at the meeting? The enforcer hesitated, clearly under orders not to disclose details in public. We have instructions to escort you safely, he said, voice taut with authority. Please come with us. Your fiancé is not in danger, but you are needed urgently. Elara's heart hammered. She glanced around at the onlookers, well aware that refusal might cause a scene. Still, dread twisted inside her. I will come, but I want to know why, she insisted. The enforcer offered a vague explanation about unforeseen circumstances and pressed her to hurry. Worry for Everett gnawed at her, overshadowing any hesitation. Gritting her teeth, she followed them out of the marketplace. They led her to a vehicle that bore the emblem of Rowan's pack, and within moments, she found herself barreling down a winding road toward the northern territory where Rowan's domain lay. As the scenery blurred past, Elara's thoughts tumbled in disarray. She wondered if the alliance had suddenly soured, or if a rival pack threatened the newly established peace. Could this summons be related to her past with Rowan? The possibility that it was a ruse to corner her privately gnawed at her nerves, but she clung to the hope that it was a genuine crisis. The journey felt longer than it was. By the time they arrived at Rowan's compound, a sprawling settlement ringed by forest and high fences, her nerves were frayed. She was whisked into a large building that served as both administrative hub and pack house. The main entrance opened into a spacious foyer, featuring polished floors and walls adorned with artwork depicting wolves in various poses. She barely registered the grandeur, searching for Everett or any sign of what calamity might have occurred. Just as she was about to demand an explanation, Rowan appeared at the far end of the corridor, striding swiftly toward her. Relief flooded her in a rush, though it was tinged with sharp anxiety. "What is going on?" she demanded, her tone sharper than intended. "Is Everett all right?" Rowan's gaze was earnest, yet overshadowed by tension. "Everett is fine," he assured her, gesturing for her to follow him into a nearby room. "There is a problem with the supply lines. Some caravans have gone missing on a dangerous route, and we suspect a rogue faction is responsible. We need your help to retrace the paths and see if we can figure out where the shipments might have been taken. You have the most comprehensive knowledge of these routes." So, I sent for you as soon as we received the reports. Her shoulders sagged in relief that Everett was not harmed. Yet a new worry took root. Rogue wolves were notorious for preying on unsuspecting merchants or travelers. She swallowed, stepping into the office he indicated, which contained a large table spread with maps. Torches flickered along the walls, granting the room a subdued glow. Several anxious-looking advisors huddled around the table, scanning lines that indicated roads and pathways. "You think I can help pinpoint the weak spots?" Elara asked, stepping closer to the map. Rowan nodded, his expression sober. "We do. We cannot afford to lose these supply lines. The alliance is still fragile, and if caravans keep vanishing, the smaller packs could withdraw their support. I know you are not part of my pack, but your expertise is unmatched." He paused, as if struggling with his next words, then pressed on. "You have every right to refuse, but I hope you will lend your knowledge. I swear it is not a trick." Elara inhaled slowly. Despite her tumultuous personal history with Rowan, she recognized the seriousness of the situation. If unscrupulous rogues were targeting routes she had once traveled, she might be able to offer strategic insight. Moreover, she could not stand by if this crisis threatened the stability of the entire region, including Everett's livelihood. "I will do what I can," she agreed, stepping up to examine the map. "Show me which caravans disappeared." One of Rowan's advisors pointed to a winding road that cut through dense woodland. "They were last seen here, near the old Ravendale crossing," he said. "The place is known for its narrow passes and a few blind corners. When we sent scouts, they found traces of overturned wagons, but no cargo, no bodies, no major clues." Elara studied the routes, recalling memories of traveling that same path years ago to sell her jewelry. She remembered a precarious turn near a rocky outcropping, a perfect spot for an ambush. She ran her finger along a smaller trail that branched off the main route. "This side path may have been used as an escape route," she mused aloud. "It is less known, which might suit a small band of rogues trying to avoid detection. If I were them, I would strike at the narrow pass, then drag the loot down here." She tapped a segment that meandered deeper into the woods. "It ultimately leads to a network of caves. They could be hiding there." Her suggestion triggered immediate discussion among Rowan's advisors. Rowan, however, watched her with a mixture of respect and something else, an unspoken memory of how they used to strategize together, even if the stakes were different back then. Feeling the weight of his gaze, she forced herself to focus on the matter at hand. She explained in detail how the caravans might be systematically targeted, referencing her knowledge of terrain and the behavior of outlaws in that region. At length, Rowan nodded. "We will organize a search party and coordinate with the allied packs," he said. Then he turned to Elara, tone resolute. "We need to move quickly. Will you join us in the planning session? Your input could mean the difference between success and another disappearance." A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in her chest. She wanted to refuse, to keep her distance and avoid further entanglement with Rowan. Yet she saw the earnest fear in the advisor's eyes, and she knew that rogue activity, left unchecked, could escalate. She pushed aside her discomfort. "I will help, for the sake of everyone who relies on these trade routes." Rowan's expression softened, a quiet thankfulness flickering there. He directed his advisors to assemble a detailed plan. Within minutes, the office was buzzing, with individuals unrolling additional maps, marking potential vantage points, and conferring about the number of fighters needed. They agreed on sending 2 teams, one to investigate the site of the most recent disappearance, and another to sweep the side path for any signs of a base camp. Elara contributed practical suggestions on how the caravans might be guarded in future ventures. Just as they were finalizing the details, Everett entered the room. Relief visibly washed over him when he spotted Elara. He rushed to her side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "They told me you arrived," he said, voice tight with concern. "I came as soon as I heard. Are you all right?" She nodded, feeling the tension ease from her muscles as she met his worried gaze. "I am fine. Rowan asked for my assistance regarding the missing caravans. We are almost done planning the operation." Everett studied Rowan's face for a moment, then gave a short nod. "Thank you for calling on her expertise," he said, though his voice lacked warmth. It was neither rude nor welcoming, simply courteous. Rowan accepted the thanks without comment, quickly returning to the matter of finalizing the teams. Once the plan was set, he assigned roles. "We move at dawn," he said, addressing the gathered group. "I will lead the primary search party toward the Ravendale crossing. My second-in-command will take the second group along the side path. We need vigilance. These rogues have proven cunning." Elara glanced at Everett, relieved when he announced he would be supporting the second group, scouring the lesser-known trails. She preferred not to see him in direct confrontation if it could be avoided, though he was no stranger to defending pack territory. Rowan's pack was known for its efficiency in dealing with threats, and now they would extend that protection beyond their borders, as part of the Alliance's purpose. Within the hour, the meeting concluded, and the advisors filtered out to prepare for the expedition. Elara intended to follow Everett out of the building, but Rowan stopped her at the door. The look in his eyes was measured, as if he debated whether to speak. "Elara," he said quietly, "thank you for being willing to help, despite everything. You did not have to, but you came. It means more than you know." She let out a low breath. The intensity of her conflicting feelings was stifling. "This is about more than us," she replied firmly. "I will always do what is right for those who depend on the safety of these routes. Do not mistake it for anything else." He held her gaze for a moment longer, as if he wanted to challenge her words. Then he inclined his head. "Understood. If you need anything while you are here, let me know." Before he could say more, she turned and slipped into the hallway, Everett following closely. Once they were outside, she finally exhaled, leaning against a nearby column. "That was more than I bargained for," she murmured. The crisp evening air carried the scent of pine and the faint hush of a breeze through the trees. "I came here terrified something had happened to you. Instead, I am embroiled in a crisis that apparently only I can solve." Everett rubbed the back of his neck. "I had no idea Rowan would drag you in like that. But I can see why he needs your insight. You have traveled those routes since you were young. It is a good thing you came, or we might be fumbling in the dark." The tension gradually ebbed as they walked away from the building. Elara tried to reassure herself that this was a temporary collaboration with Rowan, driven by necessity rather than personal desire. Yet part of her could not deny the pulse of lingering tension in her veins each time she was near him. She despised that she still reacted on such an instinctive level, even after building a life with Everett. She silently vowed that once these caravans were safe, she would return to her daily rhythm without looking back. Night had fallen fully by the time they arrived at the guest quarters Rowan's pack had arranged for travelers. The modest rooms were equipped with basic necessities: a comfortable bed, a small sitting area, and a locked trunk for belongings. Everett and Elara were assigned a private chamber where they shared a hurried meal of bread, stew, and water. The meal conversation was subdued, both of them fatigued from the day's events. The rogue threat weighed heavily on them, along with the complicated implications of working so closely with Rowan. When Elara finally lay down, her mind refused to still. She gazed at the ceiling, recalling every detail of her conversation with Rowan, every flicker in his expression. Was he tormented by the bond he had once cast aside, or had he fully moved on, only to discover that his wolf still recognized her on a primal level? She tossed and turned, frustrated by the persistence of her thoughts. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her. She drifted into an uneasy sleep where fleeting dreams depicted shadowy paths and unseen adversaries. Yet amidst those ominous images, she caught glimpses of Rowan's face, sorrowful and longing, as if trapped in a memory he could not escape. She woke before dawn, the tension from her restless night still coiled in her muscles. Everett was stirring beside her, equally aware of the early start they faced. They readied themselves quickly, dressing in practical attire suited for tracking and potential confrontation. Wolves had the advantage of heightened senses, but that did not negate the need for sturdy boots, warm layers, and basic supplies. Stepping outside, Elara breathed in the chill air. The eastern sky was painted in subtle washes of gray-blue, hinting at the sun's imminent ascent. Members of Rowan's pack were already bustling about the courtyard, preparing weapons, distributing maps, and finalizing strategy. Rowan himself stood at the center, wearing dark, functional clothing. He was speaking with a small group of skilled fighters, expression firm, every inch the alpha about to lead his wolves into a treacherous situation. When Rowan spotted Elara, his gaze flickered briefly, but he did not approach her directly. Instead, he continued instructing his fighters, while Everett joined the group assigned to the second team. Elara observed from the side, aware she was an outsider in this territory, yet bound to them all by the temporary alliance. Her heart pounded with conflicting emotions, fear for Everett's safety, dread at confronting potential danger, and an unsettling awareness that Rowan was near. Minutes later, Rowan wrapped up his briefing and approached Elara. "I want you with the first group," he said without preamble. "You know the terrain best, and we need your guidance on the spot. My second-in-command will handle matters once we split up at the crossing." She swallowed hard. Being in Rowan's group meant traveling with him, possibly fighting alongside him if they ran into danger. Part of her wanted to protest, but logic told her it made sense. She was the one who had suggested the side path, but the initial approach to the crossing would require first-hand knowledge of where the rogues were most likely to strike. "All right," she agreed softly. "I will do my part." Before they departed, she squeezed Everett's hand, wishing him luck. He murmured his reassurance and reminded her to stay safe. The two groups then headed out, leaving the pack compound behind as the sun finally peeked over the horizon. Horses and wagons were used for part of the trip, though many werewolves preferred to rely on their natural speed. Rowan's group took a swift but cautious pace through the forest trails. Every crunch of fallen leaves underfoot set Elara's nerves on edge. Her wolf remained alert, scanning the environment for any hint of threat. Over the course of the morning, they navigated winding routes, pausing occasionally to recheck the map, verifying that they were on the right track. Rowan consulted Elara each time, carefully weighing her advice. She offered what guidance she could, pointing out hidden clearings and potential vantage points. The dynamic between them was subdued but focused. If any personal conversation threatened to surface, it was quickly pushed aside by the urgency of their mission. Around midday, they reached the infamous Ravendale crossing. The terrain was just as Elara remembered, a narrow pass flanked by steep hills, thick with trees that blocked out much of the sunlight. A few scattered boulders provided natural cover. The remains of broken wagons and shredded tarp still littered the area, a stark testament to the violence that had occurred. Elara felt her chest tighten at the sight. "They attacked swiftly," she murmured. "Likely took the goods and fled. If we keep following the trail, we will eventually see where they branched off." Rowan nodded. "Spread out," he instructed his fighters, voice low but carrying the authority of an alpha. "Stay within sight of each other. If you find anything, tracks, scents, discarded cargo, notify the group." They carefully navigated the crossing, searching for clues. Elara crouched by a damaged wheel, checking for signs of footprints or paw prints in the soft ground. She caught a faint whiff of a scent that did not belong to any of Rowan's wolves. It was stale, but definitely there. Another fighter joined her, pointing to scuff marks on the rocky path. A struggle had taken place here, that much was certain. A low growl came from one of Rowan's men, and he signaled for the others to gather. They had discovered footprints leading toward a dense cluster of trees on the eastern side of the path. Elara approached swiftly, her pulse racing. The impressions were of several individuals, too many for a casual hunting party. Without question, these tracks belonged to rogues. The group moved in formation, Rowan at the lead, and Elara close enough to consult if necessary. As they penetrated the woodland, the scent grew marginally stronger, though still not fresh. The path was treacherous, thick roots and brambles threatening to trip the unwary. The day wore on with no immediate confrontation, yet every step felt heavier with apprehension. When the sun began its slow descent, Rowan called a halt near a small clearing. "We will make camp here," he announced. "We cannot risk traveling in the dark without proper visibility. We will resume at first light." Tents were set up quickly. Elara kept herself busy, helping to organize the scant supplies they had carried. The hush of the forest at dusk was both serene and foreboding. She noticed Rowan across the clearing, quietly conferring with a pair of senior fighters. His stance was rigid, his voice too quiet for her to catch more than a murmur. When their eyes briefly met, a fleeting sensation coursed through her, like an echo of the mate bond that she wished would vanish. Later, when most of the group huddled around a small fire to share a simple meal, Rowan joined them, though he maintained a formal distance. The conversation circled around the mission, everyone speculating about the rogues' motivations. Some wondered if the stolen goods were being sold on the black market in far-off cities. Others suspected the involvement of a disgruntled pack that refused the alliance. Elara contributed what she knew, describing how stolen merchandise might be laundered through obscure trade posts. Rowan listened intently, occasionally prompting her for more details. Every question he asked felt like a spotlight shining on her. She answered as best she could, feeling an uncomfortable warmth creeping up her neck whenever his attention lingered for more than a moment. Once dinner was done, the group decided on a watch rotation. Elara volunteered for an early shift, partially to keep her mind occupied. She perched on the edge of the camp, scanning the perimeter with keen ears, eyes attuned to the slightest movement. The forest night was alive with the soft chatter of insects and the rustle of animals. Flickers of moonlight filtered through the canopy. She felt simultaneously exposed and safe, as if straddling the line between her old life and her new one. She forced her mind to remain on guard duty, not drifting into painful recollections. Hours passed uneventfully, and she was eventually relieved by another fighter. Exhaustion pulled at her, but she dreaded the restlessness her sleep might bring. She retreated to her tent, lying on her back atop the blanket, listening to the muffled sound of the forest. As her consciousness wavered, her thoughts inevitably drifted to Rowan, to the shape of his jaw when he glanced at her, to the tension in his voice that belied a deeper longing. She told herself to concentrate on Everett, on the man who had chosen her even when her heart was battered. Yet the bond with Rowan, weakened by rejection and time, still pulsed faintly, refusing to die completely. At last, she fell into a fitful doze. Tomorrow, they would push deeper, perhaps confront the rogues. She clutched at the hope that once the crisis was resolved, she could leave Rowan's territory behind without regret. That tomorrow would bring clarity, or at least enough distraction to keep her from the tangled memories that threatened her peace of mind. A final flicker of awareness glimmered in the back of her mind. She was not the only one in the camp who lay awake, wrestling with the ghosts of a lost future. The forest stirred with the restless energy of morning as Elara woke to the faint sound of movement around the campsite. She peeked outside her tent flap to see dim light filtering through tall pines, the sky tinged with the first hints of sunrise. Around her, Rowan's fighters were already shaking off their slumber, preparing to continue the search for the elusive rogues who had been disrupting trade. Quiet conversations punctuated the chill dawn air as weapons were checked, boots were tightened, and supplies were quickly inventoried. Her breath came out in a soft plume as she stepped into the clearing. She had no time for regrets or tangled emotions this morning. The mission demanded focus. The more quickly they solved this crisis, the sooner she could return to Everett and make plans for their future. One that, she told herself firmly, did not include Rowan in any meaningful capacity. She caught sight of him standing by a low-burning fire, speaking to one of his senior men in hushed tones. Though his posture was calm, there was a tension in the way his shoulders set, as if he carried a burden too heavy to fully conceal. Rowan concluded his briefing with the fighter and turned, noticing her. For a moment, neither spoke, their gazes locked in an uneasy truce. Then he inclined his head, gesturing for her to come closer. "We will move out in 10 minutes, he said, voice hushed but certain. "We need to follow the tracks we found yesterday, and we will form smaller scouting pairs if the main path diverges again." Elara folded her arms, her heart pulsing at his nearness. "I will be ready. Thank you for the warning." She paused, glancing over her shoulder at the circle of tents behind them. "Where is everyone else?" "Most are already packing up or taking a quick meal," Rowan replied. "We cannot risk lighting a larger fire in rogue territory. We will eat on the move." His gaze flicked to her, lingering a beat too long. "Have you slept? You look pale." "I am fine," she said briskly, brushing off any concern. "A night in the woods is hardly new for me. Let us focus on the task. The tracks are faint, so we will need to stay vigilant." He held her gaze with that penetrating intensity she remembered from years past, the kind that once made her feel deeply seen and dangerously exposed. Then, with a concise nod, he strode away to check on another group of fighters. Elara exhaled, annoyed at how quickly her chest tightened under his scrutiny. She busied herself by rolling up her tent and tying it to a small travel pack. Within minutes, the camp had been cleared, though everyone had the faint look of fatigue. A shared resolve to find these rogues pulsed through the group like a steady drumbeat. They set off as the sun began to crest the tops of the trees. Beams of light reached down through gaps in the canopy, illuminating scattered leaves and patches of forest floor in a golden glow. Despite the picturesque surroundings, the tension was thick. Elara and Rowan walked near the front of the formation, flanked by 2 experienced scouts who occasionally knelt to examine the ground or sniff the air. Bits of scattered debris, perhaps from the stolen merchandise, offered intermittent clues, but it remained impossible to tell just how numerous their enemies might be. Elara kept her senses on high alert, straining to detect any hint of movement or unfamiliar scent. She recalled from past experiences that some rogues formed small clusters, eking out an existence on the fringes of pack territory. Others banded together under a cruel leader, turning into vicious raiding parties. So far, these attacks seemed organized, and that possibility made her uneasy. Organized rogues rarely hesitated to spill blood if it advanced their cause. After several hours of walking, they came upon a natural choke point in the terrain. 2 rocky outcroppings jutted inward, leaving only a narrow pass shadowed by dense pines. The scouts halted, scanning the area with wary eyes. Elara recognized it as one of the spots she had marked as highly susceptible to ambush. She readied herself for the possibility that eyes could be watching from the boulders above. Rowan signaled for the group to fan out quietly, and Elara positioned herself just behind him. He moved with a lithe grace, stepping carefully, listening intently to every rustle of branches. The entire party advanced, inch by inch, across the stony ground. A hawk's cry echoed overhead, and for a moment, all other sound seemed to vanish, replaced by the thudding of Elara's heart. Tension coiled in her stomach like a spring. Then it came, a sudden crack of a branch followed by a flash of movement. The rogues materialized from behind the rocks and among the pine trees, a flurry of snarls and surging bodies. Some were in wolf form, their fur bristling, while others emerged in human shape, brandishing crude weapons. It was clear they had the advantage of higher ground and the element of surprise. Rowan's fighters reacted instantly, forming a defensive line. The air erupted with the growls of wolves shifting and the clang of blades meeting stone. 2 rogues hurtled down from the top of a boulder, launching themselves at Rowan. He dodged deftly, grabbing one by the arm and flipping him onto the ground in a single fluid motion. Elara spun to the side, narrowly evading a rogue's swiping claws. She stumbled, heart hammering, but quickly recovered, summoning the instincts her wolf provided. Over the next frantic minutes, chaos reigned. Metallic scents mingled with the raw smell of churned earth. Attacks came from multiple angles. Elara found herself fending off a gruff rogue whose eyes gleamed with a hunger for violence. He swung a rusted blade in a low arc, forcing her to back away. Her mind raced. She was not a trained warrior, but she could defend herself if needed. As he lunged again, she shifted partially, letting her wolf heighten her reflexes. She grabbed his wrist, twisting viciously until he howled and dropped the weapon. Using the momentary advantage, she kicked him backward into the underbrush. A second rogue appeared, launching himself at Elara from behind. Before she could spin around, Rowan's form blurred into view. He seized the rogue by the throat, pinning him against a tree. The intruder let out a strangled gasp, and Rowan's eyes flared with lethal intent. For an instant, Elara thought Rowan might crush the man's windpipe without hesitation. Instead, he slammed the rogue down, disorienting him. The fight raged on, with Rowan's fighters coordinating to press the attackers back into the narrower crevices of the terrain. A strangled yelp from the far side of the battlefield drew Elara's attention. One of Rowan's men had been badly wounded, pinned beneath a heavy-set rogue in wolf form. Elara dashed forward, ignoring the burn of her muscles, but Rowan was faster, clearing the distance in seconds. He tackled the wolf, claws raking down the rogue's side, forcing him to relinquish his captive. Nearby, one of Rowan's senior fighters swiftly escorted the injured man to safety behind a rocky shelf. Finally, as the skirmish reached its crescendo, the rogues realized they were outnumbered. Some retreated into the trees, howling in frustration. Others surrendered on the spot, dropping their weapons in submission. When the dust settled, Rowan's wolves had taken a handful of captives, while several rogues managed to slip away among the dark pines. A few more lay unconscious or too injured to flee. Heavy breathing and groans of pain replaced the harsh ring of battle. Elara placed a hand on her chest, feeling her heart race. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, though she had minor scrapes along her forearms and a bruise forming on her hip. She was otherwise unhurt. Around her, Rowan's fighters quickly regrouped, assessing injuries. Rowan stood in the center, scanning the area with fierce eyes, searching for any sign of renewed hostility. Once he was satisfied there were no lingering threats, he signaled for the group to gather by the prisoners. "We have several questions," he told the subdued captives, voice taut with anger. "Who commands you? And where are you hiding the stolen goods?" Most of the rogues glared in sullen silence, refusing to respond. One of the younger men among them let out a guttural snarl. "We do not answer to pampered alphas," he spat. "We take what we need. That is all you need to know." Rowan's jaw clenched. Before he could retort, one of the senior fighters growled, stepping closer to the prisoner with intimidation in his stance. Elara, standing at Rowan's shoulder, sensed that the situation could turn violent if not handled carefully. "Calm yourself," she murmured to the fighter. "We need answers, not broken bodies." Several long moments passed. Under the unyielding force of the pack's collective gaze, one of the rogues finally buckled. He was a wiry, older man, with streaks of silver in his hair. He coughed, swallowing as if tasting bitterness. We do not have a single leader," he muttered. "We are a band of outcasts from different packs. Some came willingly, others had nowhere else to go. The stolen goods are hidden in a cave not far from here, near a waterfall. We have been taking them to barter for supplies and the black market." Rowan demanded more details. The exact path, how many were stationed there, whether they had hostages, or if they intended to harm travelers. The rogue was reluctant to elaborate, but a steely look from Rowan, and the presence of half a dozen armed wolves, proved persuasive. He disclosed enough to confirm that the main stash was a short trek deeper into the forest. Glancing at Elara, Rowan motioned to her in gratitude. "Your knowledge guided us here. We have part of our answer. Now, we must clear that cave." He turned to his second-in-command, who had emerged from the nearby thicket. "Take the prisoners back to the compound and hold them. Keep them under guard until we decide on their fate. Have the injured transported as well. I will lead a smaller squad toward this cave." One of the scouts pointed out that the daylight was aging fast, and a strong possibility remained that more rogues might return under cover of darkness. Yet Rowan was adamant they could not allow the culprits time to move the stolen goods again. "We go now," he declared. "We finish this before they slip away." Though Elara's pulse still hammered from the fight, she found herself stepping forward. She was determined to see this through, especially after putting herself on the line for this mission. "I will join the search party," she announced, though part of her cringed at the idea of another confrontation. Rowan studied her a moment, the faintest flicker of conflict in his gaze. Then, "Stay close," he said. "We have no idea what might be waiting for us." A dozen fighters from his pack volunteered to accompany them. The rest stayed behind to secure the prisoners and escort the wounded to safer ground. With that, Elara, Rowan, and their lean squad pressed on into the deeper reaches of the forest, armed with the intelligence gleaned from the captives. She noticed the hush that fell over them, each step measured, each eye scanning the shadows. Their path guided them away from the rockier terrain and into dense woodland, where thick moss coated gnarled roots, and ferns clustered at the base of towering pines. The air grew cooler, laced with the faint trickle of running water. Elara heard a distant rush and realized they were nearing the waterfall the rogue had mentioned. The ground grew damper underfoot. They advanced quietly, mindful that any careless sound could alert hidden sentries. At last, they glimpsed the water, a foaming cascade tumbling over rugged stones into a wide pool. Mist clung to the air, sparkling in the waning sunlight. Nearby, half concealed by draping vines, was a cave mouth, just large enough for a man to walk through. Rowan raised a hand, signaling everyone to halt. The hush of the waterfall shrouded them, but if more rogues were inside, they might be posted on lookout. Dividing into two teams, they approached with care. One group circled around to the rear, searching for another entrance or an escape route, while Rowan, Elara, and a handful of fighters crept closer to the main entrance. Hearts pounded in collective rhythm. The moist air tasted metallic on Elara's tongue. Her wolf flared to the surface, senses attuned to the subtlest shift. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the vines, a rogue with a battered crossbow in hand. He spotted Rowan instantly, letting out a sharp yell. Before he could fire, one of Rowan's men tackled him to the ground, disarming him with a swift blow. The battle cry echoed into the cave, no doubt alerting whoever lurked inside. Without hesitation, Rowan charged through the opening. Elara followed in his wake, braced for conflict. Inside, the cave walls glistened with dampness. Dim torches lined the cavern, casting flickering light on the stolen crates and sacks piled haphazardly. The rogues there, caught off guard, scrambled to defend themselves. Some grabbed makeshift weapons, while others shifted into wolf form, growling low in their throats. Rowan's group surged forward, refusing to be ambushed. The enclosed space magnified every sound: the snarl of wolves, the clash of steel, the sharp thwack of arrows ricocheting off stone. Elara ducked behind a crate as one rogue flung a spear in her direction. It glanced off the cavern wall, narrowly missing her shoulder. The adrenaline in her system sharpened her focus. She peered around the crate, spotting Rowan locked in fierce combat with a towering rogue in wolf shape. Droplets of water from the waterfall's mist coated the floor, making the footing treacherous. One rogue lunged toward her with a short blade. She sidestepped, slamming the crate lid against his head in a burst of desperation. He stumbled, dazed. She used the opening to shove him back, her heart thundering. Dimly, she was aware of Rowan subduing his opponent with a final, devastating blow. The scattered fights around them were winding down as Rowan's men gained the upper hand. The rogues, outnumbered and trapped, realized they had nowhere to run. Some dropped their weapons, voices raised in surrender, while others attempted futile last stands. Within minutes, the conflict had ended as abruptly as it began. Panting, Elara surveyed the space. Broken crates, spilled supplies, and unconscious rogues littered the cavern floor. Several of Rowan's men were tending minor injuries, while the rest searched the area for hidden tunnels or contraband. At the back of the cave they found heaps of stolen goods, crates filled with fabrics, sealed barrels of grain, boxes of crafted wares likely stolen from traveling merchants. Relief washed over Elara. At least these caravans had not vanished without a trace. They could now return the goods to their rightful owners. Rowan wiped sweat from his brow and stepped near Elara. "You are not hurt?" he asked, gaze scanning her face and arms. She shook her head, pressing a palm against the stitch in her side. "Just a little scraped up and tired. You?" He shrugged, chest heaving from exertion. "A few bruises. Nothing serious." His expression turned solemn as he regarded the subdued rogues. "We have to decide their fate. Some might be punishing the packs that cast them out, but that is no excuse for endangering innocents." Elara followed his glance, noticing a handful of conscious prisoners glowering in silence. She could not muster pity for those who had nearly killed them, but she still felt a pang of empathy for souls who might have lost their way. Perhaps some can be rehabilitated if they truly regret their actions, she said. But that is for the allied packs to decide. Under your leadership, I suppose. Rowan's jaw tensed slightly at the last remark. I will call a council. Each pack must weigh in. That is how the alliance works now. He paused, stepping closer, lowering his voice. You fought bravely today, Elara. I am grateful. She recognized the undercurrent in his tone, the unspoken memory of the bond they once shared, the regrets left unvoiced. Standing so near, she felt a surge of warmth that had no place in this dank cave. She pushed it aside, reminding herself that she was promised to another. I did what anyone would do to protect innocent travelers, she murmured, forcing her voice to remain impersonal. That is all. He nodded, as though accepting a boundary she had drawn. Then, with a brief, guarded look, he moved away to address his men. Left alone, Elara sucked in a steadying breath. She felt simultaneously relieved that the main threat of these rogues had been neutralized and unsettled by how easily Rowan's presence could stir up old emotions. She reminded herself of the vow she had made. Once this was done, she would go home to Everett, plan her wedding, and find happiness in an unshakable new life. Those reassuring thoughts carried her out of the cave and into the moist air near the waterfall. There, the rest of the squad was beginning to organize for the return trip. They had to transport the stolen goods and the captured rogues back to Rowan's compound, where a more formal proceeding would unfold. Though the day was almost over, they had accomplished what they set out to do. Even so, her heart still pounded with residual adrenaline, reminding her that the real conflict, the battle for her own sense of resolution, remained unresolved. Twilight fell by the time the group trudged back to Rowan's settlement, laden with salvaged cargo and disgruntled captives. The gates opened at once, and a cluster of pack medics hurried forward to tend the injured. Other wolves took charge of the crates, carefully sorting and labeling them so they could be returned to the proper traders or households. The entire compound bustled with purposeful chaos. Elara stood by a wagon that had been repurposed to carry the goods, watching as the last prisoners were escorted inside. Her body ached, and exhaustion pressed at her temples. She was about to slip away and find Everett, longing for a simple embrace, when Rowan approached with two of his highest-ranking advisors. They wore grim, fatigued expressions. "Elara," Rowan began, "you have done more than enough already, but there is a final matter to address. We plan to meet with representatives from each pack tomorrow morning to distribute the recovered goods and determine the rogue's punishment. Will you be there to provide your perspective on fair compensation?" She hesitated, feeling the weight of the day's events on her shoulders. She was not eager for more entanglement with Rowan, yet she understood the importance of ensuring the rightful owners reclaimed their possessions. This was part of the Alliance's stability, which in turn affected Everett's pack. "Yes," she said quietly, "I will come. Then, after that, I intend to leave." "Understood," Rowan said in a subdued tone. His advisors murmured polite thanks to her and moved off to handle the administrative load. For a moment, Rowan lingered. "Thank you," he said softly, giving her a final, solemn look before turning on his heel and striding away. A swirl of conflicting emotions welled inside Elara. She wanted nothing more than to rest, physically and mentally, from the tension of the day. Thankfully, the next familiar face she saw was Everett's, weaving through the crowd to reach her. Relief flooded her as she ran into his arms. "You are safe," she breathed, pressing against his chest as his warmth enveloped her. "I have been worried." Everett pulled back, studying the dust and minor scrapes on her skin, concern etched in his features. "I heard from the scouts that you were ambushed, but that Rowan's group fought back and succeeded in recovering the stolen goods. I wanted to ride out and help you, but your message said I was needed to coordinate at our own pack's border. I have been sick with worry ever since." She could not help the faint smile that touched her lips, touched by his genuine concern. "I am fine, truly, just exhausted. It is over. The rogues are captured or scattered. The goods will be returned to their owners." Everett brushed a thumb gently across a bruise on her arm. "We should get you some rest. Come on. I will sort out a place for us to stay tonight. Then, as soon as the morning meeting is done, we can head home." She nodded, allowing him to guide her away from the bustle. Her mind flitted back, unbidden, to Rowan's expression in the cave, the protective rage in his eyes, the relief when he saw she was unharmed. She shook the image away, clinging to the here and now. Everett was her present, her safety net, the man who had stuck with her through heartbreak and renewed hope. Despite the complicated swirl of her emotions, she was determined to honor what she had built with him. As the sky deepened into a star-flecked midnight blue, she settled into a quiet chamber prepared for them in the guest wing. Everett left briefly to retrieve food and water, giving her space to wash and change into clean clothes. She looked at her reflection in a small mirror on the wall, noticing the new cuts and the shadows under her eyes. So many thoughts churned in her mind that it felt impossible to corral them. Yet one conviction loomed above all else. She would finalize her role in this alliance tomorrow, and then she would leave Rowan's territory behind. Whatever old embers flickered between them belonged to a past she refused to rekindle. She told herself she was determined to build a life with Everett, a life that did not end in shards of regret and unanswered questions. For 5 years she had sustained herself on the idea that she could move forward, that a bright future awaited her if she only had the courage to seize it. She was not about to let Rowan's unexpected re-entry derail her hard-earned peace. As she slipped under the covers and Everett joined her, she felt his reassuring presence. He whispered words of gratitude that she was safe, that they could soon return to the life they had built. She closed her eyes, letting his voice calm the residual tremor in her soul. Outside, the night air held a hush of uncertainty, but she reminded herself that with the rogues subdued, at least one danger had been laid to rest. Tomorrow, she would do her final duty here and end this chapter once and for all, or so she vowed, in the quiet realm between wakefulness and sleep. Morning arrived swiftly, carrying with it a tension that pulsed through the corridors of Rowan's compound. Delegates and representatives from various packs converged for the meeting, each eager to reclaim their stolen goods or negotiate restitution for the losses incurred. Elara dressed simply, her muscles still sore from the previous day's battle. She found Everett in the adjacent sitting room, conferring with his father about their own pack's minor losses. He looked relieved to see her upright and steady. Without words, he reached out, lacing his fingers through hers. They proceeded together to the assembly hall, a large chamber with vaulted ceilings and tall windows that let in bright streaks of morning light. Rows of wooden chairs were arranged in a semicircle, facing a broad table at the front. There, Rowan and several allied leaders were seated, poring over documents that detailed the stolen cargo. Guards stood by, ensuring that the captured rogues did not cause any disturbance. The high tension in the air was impossible to ignore. The entire region had been shaken by these thefts, and trust was fragile. Elara and Everett took seats near the front, where other representatives gathered, each prepared to speak on behalf of their territory's concerns. Quiet murmurs rippled among the crowd, but the room hushed as soon as Rowan stood. He surveyed those present, his stance exuding confidence even though the lines of fatigue were etched on his face. "Good morning," he began. "Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, we have apprehended a significant group of rogues responsible for attacks on trade caravans. Their stash of stolen goods has been recovered. Our first priority is to return these goods to their rightful owners," followed by a discussion of how we address the criminals. A general murmur of approval greeted his statement. One by one, merchants or their representatives stepped forward to claim specific cargo. Metal chests were unlocked and crates were opened. A father found the embroidered textiles meant for his daughter's wedding. A craftsman identified the unique ceramic pots he had painstakingly created. An older merchant teared up when he discovered a box of precious family heirlooms he thought lost forever. Row by row, proof of the thefts came to light, fueling anger among some and gratitude in others. Elara felt a stir of pride that her input had guided Rowan's warriors to this outcome. But she tried to maintain a calm facade, focusing on the practicality of the process rather than the personal satisfaction. Eventually, one of Rowan's advisors gestured for her to speak on behalf of the craftsmen from her area who had reported smaller items missing. She stepped up to the table, aware of the many eyes upon her, Rowan's included. Clearing her throat, she enumerated several specific pieces she had recognized while cataloging the stolen goods: hand-carved bracelets, etched pendants, and a set of polished stones ready to be turned into jewelry. Some belonged to people in Everett's pack, and others to traveling merchants who frequented her workshop. "I can confirm these items are from 2 families and 1 independent craftsman," she explained, pointing to the relevant crates. "They should be returned in full." Her calm efficiency seemed to please those present. A few individuals took notes, and the crates were officially assigned to the rightful owners. When she finished, Rowan nodded at her in quiet acknowledgement. Feeling a slight rush of relief, she left the front area and rejoined Everett, who gave her a supportive squeeze of the hand. Next came the debate over what to do with the captured rogues. Several voices clamored for harsh punishment. Leaders of smaller packs, resentful of the violence done to their people, insisted that the offenders should be imprisoned for years or exiled to the wilds from which they came. Others urged caution, pointing out that not all rogues had participated equally. Some might have joined only out of desperation. The discussion teetered on the edge of an uproar, tension rippling through the hall. Finally, Rowan raised a hand, and the room fell silent. "In light of our alliance," he said, tone measured, "we must decide together. Each pack's elders or representatives have a voice. The criminals will face judgment, and those who have inflicted grievous harm will answer for it. However, those who demonstrate remorse might be permitted supervised rehabilitation. The committee can oversee that process." The proposal sparked immediate debate, but after an hour of back-and-forth negotiation, a consensus formed. The hardened offenders would remain imprisoned, while the rest would be given a chance to atone through labor or service under strict watch. Relief replaced the earlier turmoil. It was not a perfect solution, but it was one in which the allied packs retained their sense of communal justice without succumbing to barbarity. When the final decisions were recorded, a palpable sense of accomplishment swept the room. Merchants had retrieved what they had lost, criminals had been subdued, and the region's trade routes would hopefully flourish once again. The meeting adjourned, and the delegates began to disperse, some congratulating Rowan on his leadership, others shaking hands with fellow representatives to solidify the sense of unity forged by shared hardship. Elara lingered near the entrance with Everett, waiting for a moment to approach Rowan and formally excuse herself from his territory. But Rowan was swallowed by a rush of well-wishers, each eager to discuss next steps. She waited patiently, occasionally catching his eye across the crowded hall, until he finally broke free and made his way to her. "You are leaving now?" he asked quietly, glancing between her and Everett. Subtle lines around his eyes deepened, telling of unspoken disappointment. "Yes," Elara replied, keeping her tone respectful. "Our tasks here are done. I am grateful for the chance to help, but I have a life to return to, and I am sure Everett's pack needs him just as much." She paused, uncertain whether to address their personal history in front of her fiancé. Ultimately, she decided it was best to end matters in a polite, distant manner. "I wish you success with maintaining peace in these territories." Rowan stared at her for a moment, and she saw a flicker in his dark irises, something between acceptance and regret. "I thank you," he said at last. "None of this would have gone as smoothly without your knowledge and courage. You will always have a place here, should you need it." She nodded. Everett stepped forward, offering Rowan a measured handshake. "We appreciate your hospitality and your commitment to the Alliance. May it be the beginning of more stability for us all." Rowan clasped Everett's hand with a calm grip. An instant of tension lingered in the air, but then it dissolved. The two men stepped back, each acknowledging the other's role in this new era of cooperation. Elara exhaled softly, relieved that everything seemed to be ending on a civil note. They departed the hall with the departing crowds. Outside, morning sunlight bathed the compound's courtyard. Elara noticed small groups of guards organizing the transfer of goods, and overhead, a crisp breeze stirred the flags hanging from the walls. She walked by Everett's side, resolutely ignoring the pang that tugged at her chest. This was what she wanted, to leave Rowan's orbit, to continue with the life she had painstakingly rebuilt. Why, then, did she feel so unsettled? Everett wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward their carriage. His father would remain a bit longer to finalize trade matters, but Everett and Elara had permission to return home. She forced a small smile, letting the gentle rhythm of their steps soothe her. Yet just as they reached the courtyard gates, a familiar voice called out her name. She turned to see Camilla, the friend from her neighboring pack, hurrying across the cobblestones. "I am so glad I caught you," Camilla said, slightly out of breath. "Word spread about your bravery against the rogues. I wanted to see you before you left." Elara smiled, genuinely pleased. "Camilla, I am relieved to see you well. I was worried you had been traveling when the attacks escalated." Camilla shook her head, expression bright yet concerned. "I stayed put once I learned of the dangers. But enough about me. How are you truly? I see you are leaving with Everett. Are you satisfied with how everything ended here?" Choosing her words carefully, Elara nodded. "The Alliance stands, and the rogues have been dealt with. That was the main goal." Camilla's sharp gaze flicked to Everett, then back to Elara. "And you, personally?" "No regrets about, you know." Everett cleared his throat politely, but Camilla's unabashed curiosity lingered in the air. Elara exhaled, placing a hand on her friend's arm. "I have moved on, Camilla," she said quietly, aware of how that statement carried multiple layers. "I am grateful Rowan is leading effectively, but that part of my life is over. Truly." Camilla studied her for a moment, then seemed satisfied, pulling her into a quick hug. "I will not keep you. Just be sure to visit soon. We all miss your jewelry pieces on the marketplace stalls." Elara laughed softly, promising she would return once she settled at home. With that, Camilla stepped aside, and Elara and Everett finally left the compound. Their carriage ride back began in comfortable silence, the lush countryside rolling by in shades of green, gold, and brown. Her muscles screamed for rest, and her mind yearned for calm. At last, she seemed to be leaving the turbulence behind her, both the rogue crisis and the unresolved feelings Rowan's presence had reignited. Yet, as the journey stretched on, a knot of confusion tightened in her chest. She stared out the window, watching birds flit among the trees, recalling the fierce glint in Rowan's eyes when he saved her during the ambush. She remembered his quiet words after they subdued the rogues in the cave. She remembered the sense of heartbreak and lingering passion that still lay in the unspoken spaces between them. She had insisted that she did not want him. But had her wolf truly believed that? Trying to ignore the insistent churn of thoughts, Elara forced herself to focus on what awaited at home. Her workshop, the wedding details she still had to finalize, the steady routine she had grown to rely on. Everett held her hand, occasionally leaning over to ask if she needed anything. Each time, she shook her head, offering a faint smile. Guilt flickered through her that she was letting her mind drift elsewhere. She wanted to be happy by his side, free from the chains of a broken mate bond. They arrived at Everett's Pack settlement by late afternoon. It was a modest compound, smaller than Rowan's, with a more rustic charm. Wooden fences encircled neat rows of houses, and gardens dotted the spaces in between. Familiar scents welcomed Elara as they passed the entrance, wolves she recognized greeting them with nods. This was the life she had built away from heartbreak, a place where she could flourish. Everett helped her out of the carriage, his eyes filled with relief to be home. "Let us see if my father has returned," he suggested. "Perhaps he is already finalizing the details for the wedding." His tone was hopeful, warm, but something about his phrasing gave her pause, and the knot in her chest drew tighter. He noticed her momentary hesitation and frowned. "Elara, is something wrong?" She swallowed, trying to quiet the pounding of her heart. "I am just tired," she managed. "It has been a lot to handle. Let us go inside. We can talk after I have had a moment to breathe." Everett nodded, concern still etched on his face, but he allowed her space. Together they walked into the home they shared, a quaint house with a snug living room and a view of a small vegetable garden out back. Elara remembered how she had once found solace in this place, how its simple comforts had helped her heal. Yet today, she felt an inexplicable weight hanging around her neck. She retreated to her workshop, claiming she needed to check on some custom orders. In truth, she yearned for quiet to sort through her tangled thoughts. The workshop greeted her with the scent of metal filings and the soft glimmer of half-finished jewelry pieces. She slid onto a stool, letting her fingers idly trace the curve of a silver bangle she had set aside days ago. The repetition of forging beauty from raw materials had always been her anchor. Minutes passed, then an hour, but she found no clarity. Every time she closed her eyes, she glimpsed the forest ambush, Rowan's protective stance, the harsh set of his jaw when their gazes met. She remembered the crackle of energy whenever they stood too close. Old heartbreak collided with new confusion, forming a swirling tempest in her heart. Eventually, a gentle knock sounded on the workshop door. Everett stepped in, a mix of worry and patience in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, crossing the threshold to stand near her desk. "You have been in here for a while. I am trying not to hover, but I can sense something is weighing on you." Elara set the silver bangle aside, struggling to find words for the conflict that raged in her soul. She looked up, meeting his concerned gaze. "Everett," she began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. You have given me stability and kindness at a time when I was lost. I appreciate you more than you know." He eased onto a nearby stool, nodding slowly. "And I appreciate you. That is why it hurts to see you distressed. If it is about Rowan, you can tell me. I will not judge. I just want to understand." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, unbidden. She inhaled a shaky breath. "It is complicated. Being near him again stirred memories, old wounds. I thought I had healed, but my wolf recognizes him on a level I cannot ignore. And yet, I do not want to be anyone's second choice. I do not want a mate who left me and only decided later that he regretted it. You never left. You never turned your back on me. You deserve someone who is completely off." "Sure." His brow furrowed, and for a long moment he was silent, grappling with what her words implied. "Are you saying you are not sure?" he asked, voice hushed. "That you might still love him, after everything he did?" Elara winced at the question. "I do not know. Maybe it is not about love as much as it is about a bond that never fully dissolved. Wolves are primal. Even if my logical mind hates him for what he did, my instincts react to him, and I cannot pretend otherwise. I am trying to do the right thing, but I am torn." Everin exhaled, looking as though a knife had been driven into his heart. "I will not force you to marry me if you are not certain," he said softly, his voice laced with pain. "I care for you too much to push you into something that brings you torment." Her tears escaped then, rolling silently down her cheeks. She wanted to tell him that she was sure, that she wanted nothing more than a peaceful future. But the words would not form. Guilt gnawed at her. She reached for his hand, and he took it, his grip trembling. "Give me time," she whispered. "I need to sort out my emotions. The wedding is soon, but I need to be sure that I am not making a vow while my heart is torn in half. Please, please understand." He swallowed, nodding stiffly. "I do. Take the time you need, but I beg you, talk to me. Let me in on your feelings, so I am not lost in the dark. We can delay the wedding if necessary, or whatever you decide. Your happiness matters to me." Elara threw her arms around him in a desperate embrace, sobs shaking her shoulders. He held her gently, murmuring soft reassurances, even though she could feel his heartbreak in the subtle tremor of his voice. When at last her tears subsided, the exhaustion returned in full force, pressing on her like a physical weight. She retreated to their bedroom, feeling raw and uncertain. Everett remained in the workshop, likely giving her space. The evening passed in a blur of confusion, each hour heavy with the realization that her life had spun off course. She had wanted so badly to be the woman who moved on from rejection, who built an unshakable new life. Yet here she was, stuck in the aftermath of her old bond's reemergence, hurting a man who had given her nothing but kindness. Days followed with an uneasy lull. Elara tried to resume her routine, filling orders, making deliveries, working on wedding decorations, but the tension between her and Everett lingered, an unspoken awareness that everything had changed. Neighbors and friends sensed the shift, though they asked no direct questions, perhaps assuming the weight of recent events was to blame. Inside, she wrestled with an internal debate that gave her no rest. Finally, one afternoon, a knock at her door fractured what little composure she had. She opened it to find a messenger from Rowan's territory. He bowed stiffly, extending a sealed letter. "My Alpha requests you receive this," he said, then left without another word. Elara stood there, heart pounding, eyeing the envelope. Why would Rowan write to her now? She steeled herself and broke the seal. The letter was succinct. inscribed in Rowan's strong, deliberate handwriting. He thanked her again for her role in restoring stability, reported that the trade routes were thriving, and mentioned that the Allied pacts were growing more united than ever. Then came a line that made her heart skip. "If you need answers or closure, I will be here. I do not wish to disrupt your life, but my wolf and I cannot forget what once bound us. The door remains open, should you decide you need to talk." She stared at the words, her emotions in freefall. She had spent days trying to bury the remnants of longing that clung to her heart. Yet here was Rowan, gently fanning embers she was desperate to let die. An ache formed deep in her chest, an ache that reminded her of how incomplete their departure from each other had been. When Everett returned home that evening, he found her sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in front of her. His face paled, reading her expression before he spoke. "Is that from Rowan?" he asked, voice hushed. She nodded, meeting his eyes. "He wants me to visit. He says if I need closure, he will offer it, that it is my choice." The strained silence weighed on them. Then Everett took a seat beside her, reaching for her hand. "I do not want to lose you, Elara, but I cannot chain you here. If seeing him gives you the answers you need, then go. I would rather face the truth than pretend everything is normal when it is not." Tears pricked her eyes again, but she nodded, both terrified and relieved. "I hate that this hurts you. I owe you honesty, though. My heart is at war with itself. This bond I shared with Rowan might only be laid to rest if I confront it fully, and that might be what we both need to move forward." He squeezed her hand, his own trembling. "Just promise me, if you realize your place is with him, tell me openly. Do not hide it or try to spare my feelings. I love you enough to let you go if that is what you truly want." Elara swallowed a sob, leaning forward to rest her forehead against his. "I do not know what I will find, but I promise you honesty. Always." The promise felt like a knife twisting inside her, but she recognized it as the only path that might lead to genuine peace for them both. The next morning, she packed a small bag and mounted a carriage that would take her north. She left behind Everett's solemn, supportive gaze, her workshop, and the wedding preparations, all of which hung in limbo. As the vehicle rumbled over dusty roads, her mind spun with questions. Could Rowan truly offer closure without reigniting the pain they once caused each other? Or was she stepping into a labyrinth of old emotions that might destroy everything she had carefully rebuilt? The hours blurred. When at last she saw the familiar outline of Rowan's settlement, guarded by towering fences and vigilant wolves, her heart pounded in trepidation. She was greeted by an attendant who bowed respectfully, then led her inside the main building. No grand ceremony, no crowd, just quiet corridors echoing with her own footsteps. The attendant ushered her to a small parlor, opened the door, and gestured for her to enter. Rowan waited inside, his posture taut as he stood by a window that overlooked the training grounds. Soft afternoon light framed his silhouette, accentuating the power etched into his form. The moment he turned, their eyes locked, sending that now familiar jolt through Elara's system. She mustered her composure, stepping forward until she stood a few feet away, close enough to sense his wolf stirring at her presence. "You came," he said simply. His voice carried neither triumph nor regret, just a gentle acknowledgement. She clenched her trembling hands. "You said I could have answers. That is what I need." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her nerves. "I need to know why you left me without a word, why you rejected me, when every instinct told me we were fated. And I need to know what you expect now." Rowan inhaled, expression darkening with the weight of the past. He gestured for her to sit, and she did so stiffly, maintaining a guarded distance. He settled across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For a moment he seemed to struggle to begin, eyes drifting to the floor, as though the confession was almost too heavy to bear. "I left," he said at last, voice hushed, "because I believed I was doing what was best for you. My father was an unstable alpha at the time. Embroiled in dangerous conflicts, I saw the path he was on. I knew if I stayed, you would be dragged into a bloody feud that could destroy you. I thought severing our bond might protect you." Elara's eyes widened, shock warring with hurt. "So you never stopped caring?" she managed, her throat tightening. "You made the choice to break me, to reject our bond, all on your own. You never even gave me the chance to understand or decide my own fate." His fists clenched. "I was young, arrogant. I believed I had to sacrifice one heartbreak to avoid a far worse outcome. And by the time I realized how much damage it caused, you were gone, building a new life somewhere else. I thought staying away might give you peace." Her pulse hammered, tears burning behind her eyes. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? I spent years questioning my worth, thinking I was unlovable. I found someone who treated me kindly, who accepted me without reservation. I almost managed to forget you, until you returned and destroyed all Ka." "My certainty again," Rowan inhaled shakily, a spark of anguish flitting through his gaze. "I will never forgive myself for the pain I caused you. Seeing you with another man, knowing you have a life that is stable, tears me apart. But my wolf still calls for you. The bond I tried to sever never truly died." His voice cracked slightly, betraying a vulnerability he rarely showed. "I do not expect you to forget 5 years of heartbreak. Nor do I expect you to leave your fiancé if your heart truly belongs to him. I only wanted to give you the truth, so you would not carry the weight of unanswered questions." Trembling, Elara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She felt an inexplicable mixture of sorrow, rage, and an odd sense of relief at finally understanding the motive behind his actions. "This does not magically fix anything," she whispered, voice raw. "I am engaged to Everett. He stood by me when I was shattered. I do not even know if I can forgive you." Rowan nodded slowly, his eyes misted with regret. "I know. And if your choice is to remain with him, you will not hear another complaint from me. But if there is any part of you that still sees me as your mate, I will spend every day of my life trying to earn back your trust. I cannot undo the past, but I can give you my future." Her entire frame shook as she wrestled with the gravity of his words. This was not a simple apology. It was an invitation to reevaluate her entire life, a proposition that threatened to unravel the stability she had clung to for so long. Part of her wanted to run, to fling his confession back in his face. Another part remembered the closeness they once shared, the sense of profound belonging she had not managed to replicate with anyone else. "I asked Everett for time," she finally admitted, her voice trembling as she confessed the heart of her dilemma. "He knows I am here, that I need clarity. He loves me enough to let me go, if that is what I choose. I do not know how to choose." The air in the small parlor felt impossibly thick, the hush broken only by the sound of their breath. Rowan rose slowly, crossing the space with careful steps. He crouched by her side, not touching her, but close enough for her to sense the warmth of his presence. "I cannot make that choice for you," he said, eyes burning with sincerity. "I only offer what is real, a bond that has endured even our attempts to break it. If you decide to build a life with me, I will never abandon you again. If you decide you want Everett, I will step away and accept your happiness. Elara felt as though the ground were crumbling beneath her. She closed her eyes, letting waves of memory wash over her. Childhood moments of silly laughter with Rowan, teenage promises of forever, the stinging loss when he vanished, and the cautious hope that Everett had nurtured inside Prahl. Her. A swirl of conflicting loyalties threatened to suffocate her. She wanted them both, but that was impossible. She did not even know if her battered heart could handle more pain. She inhaled, forcing her eyes open to meet Rowan's. "Then give me a little while," she said, voice quivering. "Let me think, truly think, about what is right. I will let you know my decision by the next moon cycle, if that is acceptable. I cannot rush this." Relief mingled with sorrow in his expression. "I accept that. Stay here if you wish, or travel back and forth as needed. Anything. I only want you to choose freely." She nodded, unsure of her next step. Part of her wanted to flee, to run back to Everett's comforting embrace, burying the past forever. Another part recognized that her wolf ached to stay, to explore whether the reawakened bond with Rowan could be mended. For now, all she could do was breathe, one breath at a time, searching for a path amid the swirling chaos of her heart. In that single moment they sat in quiet understanding, two souls caught in the crossfire of fate and heartbreak, reaching for each other across years of regret. The next weeks would force Elara to confront the deepest truths of her own heart, truths that could reunite her with her fated mate, or affirm the new life she had painstakingly forged. Though the final choice remained a mystery, one thing was certain. The story of her and Rowan was not finished, and the outcome would shape her forever.